Close your eyes and imagine the weight of the air before a storm, that heavy, electric silence that suggests the atmosphere itself is holding its breath. We are told by the keepers of our history that the story of our species is a slow, steady climb from the mud toward the stars, a linear progression of sharpened flint becoming bronze and bronze becoming silicon. We are told that the scars upon our planet, the vast, scorched deserts and the jagged, unnaturally glassed craters, are the mere tantrums of a blind and indifferent nature. They call them meteor showers. They call them volcanic eruptions. They label them as extinction events and file them away in the cold, dust-covered drawers of geology. But there is a friction in the dirt. There is a memory in the stone that refuses to align with the narrative of a peaceful, primitive past. If you lean close to the broken basalt of the Levant or the vitrified dunes of the Gobi, you can almost hear the echo of a scream that was not human. It is the sound of a sky being torn open like a piece of silk. It is the sound of a world being systematically deleted. In the quiet halls of the British Museum, behind glass that feels too thin to hold back the weight of the truth, sits tablet K.8532. It is a fragment of the Enuma Elish, a series of cuneiform inscriptions that the academic world dismisses as a colorful creation myth. We are taught to read it as a metaphor, a poetic struggle between order and chaos. But when you strip away the layers of religious allegory, the text stops feeling like a song and begins to feel like a forensic report. It does not describe a distant, ethereal heaven. It describes a low Earth orbit filled with a terrible, mechanical intent. The tablet speaks of the weapons of Marduk, tools of destruction that the scribes struggled to name. They called it the evil wind. They called it the tempest. They spoke of a fire that devours, which did not burn from the ground up, but descended from above, turning the very fabric of the sky into a furnace. Imagine a sun that does not set, but instead expands, a blinding iris of white light that looks down with a cold, administrative precision. This was not the wrath of a god seeking worship. This was the efficiency of a high command seeking a clean slate. There is a strange, haunting consistency in the way the ancients described these events. They did not depict their deities as serene, untouchable figures. In the earliest layers of the Sumerian king list, the gods are portrayed in a state of absolute shivering terror. They are not the ones throwing the lightning. They are the ones hiding from it. They are seen huddling against the walls of their stone temples, watching the horizon with the wide, vacant eyes of the condemned. They looked at the sky and saw their own kind turning the heavens into a weapon. Why would a god fear the sky? Unless, of course, the sky was no longer a home, but a theater of war. Unless the beings we called gods were merely the middle management of a celestial hierarchy that had decided the Earth project was no longer worth the investment. Consider the black stone anomalies scattered across the cradle of civilization. In the records of the city of Ur, there are mentions of stones that fell from the heavens and burned for 7 days and 7 nights with a light that blinded any who dared to look. In the wake of these falling stars, entire dynasties were not just defeated, they were removed from the record entirely, as if they had never existed. It is a planetary hard-drive wipe. We see the evidence of this erasure not in what remains, but in the sudden, inexplicable gaps in the timeline. One day, a flourishing civilization with advanced irrigation and a complex understanding of the stars. The next, a layer of charcoal and silence. The mainstream view suggests a sudden drought or a nomadic invasion. But nomads do not turn sand into glass. Archaeologists have long puzzled over the vitrified ruins of the Indus Valley, specifically at sites like Mohenjo-Daro, the place of the dead. There, the stones of the walls have fused together. They have shifted from solid rock into a translucent, obsidian-like state. To achieve this, the environment would have to reach temperatures that mock the heat of a simple brush fire or even the most intense volcanic flow. It is a heat that demands a focus, a concentration of energy that suggests a beam, not a blaze. If you run your hand over these stones today, they feel unnaturally smooth, almost oily, as if the rock itself is still trying to slide away from the memory of the light that hit it. It is a sensory violation. It is the physical manifestation of a planetary hard-drive wipe. The theory we are investigating is not one of myth, but of a brutal, cold-blooded civil war. The Anunnaki were not a unified pantheon of divine beings. They were a fractured expeditionary force, a group of architects and engineers who found themselves at odds over the fate of their creation. We see the shadow of this conflict in the tension between two figures: Enki, the craftsman, the one who walked among the black-headed people and taught them the secrets of the me, the divine technologies, the blueprints of civilization, and Enlil, the high command, the one who viewed humanity as a noisy, unnecessary biological byproduct. Enki wanted to grant us sovereignty. He wanted to give us the keys to our own evolution. He sought to turn a colony into a kingdom. But to Enlil, this was treason. It was a breach of protocol. You do not give the tools of the masters to the livestock. When the rebellion began, it wasn't fought with swords or chariots. It was fought from the heights of the orbital platforms, using the very physics of the planet as a cudgel. Imagine the perspective from above. The Earth is not a world of beauty to these beings. It is a grid. It is a series of tectonic pressure points and atmospheric vulnerabilities. By firing targeted energy beams into the fault lines of the Mediterranean and the Mesopotamian basin, the High Command didn't just kill people, they destabilized the world. They triggered the volcanoes. They pulled the meteor showers out of the asteroid belt and guided them like kinetic slugs toward the centers of Enki's influence. The Great Flood was not an accident of nature. It was a tactical irrigation of a rebellious province. It was the flushing of a system. Think of the figure often depicted in these ancient scenes of destruction. A lone figure, dressed in the heavy, ornate regalia of an Anunnaki officer, standing amidst a landscape of falling fire. We are told he is a god presiding over a sacrifice. But look closer at his posture. Look at the way his hands are clenched, the way his head is tilted toward the zenith. He isn't presiding. He is abandoned. He is a mid-ranking officer who chose the wrong side, left behind on the surface as the extraction craft retreated into the black. He is realizing in that final, terrible moment that to his superiors, he is as expendable as the clay-bound creatures he tried to uplift. He is a ghost in a machine that is being dismantled. This was not a war for Earth. It was a war on Earth. The goal was to ensure that the planet remained a barren, manageable colony, stripped of its potential and its memory. Every few millennia, when the noise of humanity becomes too loud, when we begin to reach back toward the stars and rediscover the me, the sky turns cold. The gods look down from their orbital silence and decide it is time for another format. We live in the echoes of a conflict that ended before our history began, walking over the vitrified bones of a world that almost achieved its freedom. We find the whispers of this in the Lament for Sumer and Uar, a text that reads less like poetry and more like a survivor's account of a radioactive winter. It speaks of a dark wind that roamed the streets, a wind that did not kill with force, but with a lingering, invisible poison. It describes people losing their hair, their skin turning gray, their bodies wasting away even though they had plenty to eat. The ancients didn't have a word for radiation sickness. They didn't have a word for fallout. They only knew that the sky had cursed the ground and that the breath of the gods had become a toxin. This dark wind followed the flashes of light. It followed the evil wind of Marduk. If you look at the geography of these ancient ruins, you start to see a pattern of atmospheric displacement. The destruction is not random. It is surgical. It targets the libraries. It targets the temples where the me were kept. It targets the places of learning. The High Command wasn't just killing bodies. They were killing ideas. They were burning the books of a species that had learned too much. Earth is a machine that hides its scars remarkably well. Vegetation grows over the glassed craters. The silt of the rivers buries the radioactive layers of the past. The wind rounds off the sharp edges of the fused stone. We walk over these battlefields every day, thinking we are the first to build here. We think our technology is a new invention, a unique triumph of the human spirit. We do not realize we are merely rediscovering the scraps of a feast that was interrupted. We are the descendants of the survivors, the ones who were small enough to be overlooked, the ones who hid in the caves while the sky burned. The tragedy of the secret war is not just the loss of life, but the loss of identity. We were meant to be more than a colony. We were meant to be a partner in the cosmos. But because of a civil war in a language we can no longer speak, we were reduced to a manageable population, kept in a state of perpetual amnesia. We look at the stars and feel a sense of wonder, but beneath that wonder is a deep, ancestral fear. A fear of the sky, a fear of the light that returns to reclaim what it thinks it owns. The ruins are not just in the ground. They are in our DNA. There are sequences in our genetic code that seem to have no purpose, junk DNA, that looks like truncated commands or broken scripts. Perhaps these are the fragments of the me, the divine technologies that Enki tried to weave into our very being before the sky fell. We are a symphony that was cut short in the middle of the first movement. We are a book with its middle chapters torn out and burned. As we look at the volcanic wrath and the falling stones of our legends, we must ask ourselves, are we looking at the past, or are we looking at a blueprint? The gods did not leave because they were tired of us. They left because the job was done. The rebellion was crushed, the rebels were purged, and the earth was reset to its factory settings. But even a factory reset leaves behind fragments of the previous data. A stray file, corrupted sector, a memory of a fire that devours, and a black stone that fell from a silent, watching sky. The figure in the dust, the abandoned officer, still stands there in our collective subconscious. He is the shadow we see in the corner of our eye when we look at the ruins of UR. He is the representative of a lost possibility, a reminder that we were once at the center of a cosmic struggle for the soul of a planet. He didn't fear the fire because it was divine. He feared it because he knew exactly what it was. He knew the math of the erasure. He knew the cold, orbital logic of the planetary hard-drive wipe. And as the sand around him began to glow and melt into a green glass mirror, he didn't see a god. He saw a mirror of his own insignificance in the eyes of the high command. We are told the world is old and that its secrets are buried by time. But time is not just a duration. It is a tool of concealment. The Earth is not just a planet. It is a crime scene where the evidence has been meticulously hidden under layers of myth and sediment. We must become the forensic investigators of our own species. We must look past the meteor showers and the volcanic wrath and see the kinetic strikes for what they were. We must listen to the silence of the vitrified ruins and hear the evil wind for what it truly was. Not a ghost, but a machine. The investigation into the forgotten Earth is not a search for answers, but a search for the right questions. Why is our history so full of sudden collapses? Why do we feel a primal, unexplainable dread when the sky changes color? Why do we keep building civilizations only to watch them crumble under the weight of an invisible hand? The answers are not in the stars, but in the friction between the sky and the stone. They are in the black stone anomalies and the glass dunes of the desert. They are in the me that we were never meant to have. The me were never meant for us. In the dusty archives of the University of Pennsylvania, there are fragments that speak of these me as if they were physical objects, tablets, or perhaps small, gleaming cylinders that could be carried in a pouch. But when you listen to the way the scribes described their function, you realize they were something far more profound. They were the source code of a civilization. One me governed the art of the weaver, another the rotation of the grain, another the very laws of kingship and the movement of the tides. Enki, the master architect, the one who saw the potential in the black-headed people, began to leak this code into the world. He was not just teaching us to farm or to build. He was editing our reality. He was attempting to lift the human animal out of the mud and into a state of technological grace. This was the first great act of industrial espionage. To the high command in the orbital platforms, this was the ultimate violation. You do not hand the keys to the engine room to the cargo in the hold. There is a ledger kept in the silence of the strata, a record written in the language of isotopes and scorched earth. If you travel to the high deserts of the Gobi, far from the trade routes and the prying eyes of conventional archaeology, you will find areas where the ground itself seems to have been cauterized. There are no craters here, no jagged holes to suggest a falling rock from space. Instead, there are vast sheets of green glass, smooth as a lake and cold as the moon. When you walk upon them, the sound is like treading on the dreams of a ghost. This is the result of a process we are told only occurs in the heart of a nuclear detonation or the belly of a star. The sand has been reached by a heat so pure and so focused that it forgot how to be earth. It skipped the stage of melting and simply became light. This is the signature of the tempest of Enlil. This is the footprint of a weapon that does not strike, but erases. The mainstream narrative suggests that these glass fields are the result of airbursts, meteors that exploded in the atmosphere before hitting the ground. It is a convenient explanation, one that keeps the universe feeling chaotic and natural. But a meteor is a blunt instrument. It leaves behind traces of iron, nickel, and the debris of its own destruction. These glass fields are chemically sterile. They are clean. They suggest a beam of coherent energy, a fire that devours, that was tuned to a specific frequency. It was a surgical strike designed to eliminate a specific localized infection of knowledge. Enki's laboratories, his schools of the me, were not merely destroyed, they were unmade. The very atoms were rearranged into a state of frozen silence. If we look at the skeletons found in the streets of the Indus Valley, we see the human cost of this orbital coldness. There are skeletons lying in the streets of Mohenjo-Daro, their hands entwined, their faces turned away from a flash that happened 5,000 years ago. They were not buried. They were not part of a funeral rite. They were caught in the middle of their lives. Some are found in the postures of sleep. Others are found as if they were walking to the market. There is no evidence of trauma, no broken bones from a falling wall, no spearheads lodged in the ribs. They simply stopped. And when you bring a sensor to these bones, they hum with a lingering, invisible energy. They are more vocal than the soil around them. They are the radioactive markers of a war that used the very air as a conductor. The dark wind described in the laments was not a storm of dust. It was a storm of particles, a silent, drifting death that settled into the marrow and the blood. The High Command didn't just want to kill the rebels. They wanted to prove that the rebels were irrelevant. To Enlil, the Earth was a garden that had grown too wild, a laboratory where the specimens had started to read the notebooks. The Planetary Hard-Drive Wipe was an act of administrative necessity. Think of the tectonic destabilization as a way of clearing the board. By targeting the pressure points of the Earth's crust from above, the Anunnaki could trigger natural disasters that would do the work for them. A volcano here, a tsunami there, a shifting of the poles to induce a global flood. It allowed them to maintain the illusion of divine wrath while exercising the precision of a technician. They used the planet against itself. They turned our home into a weapon of our own destruction. In the Lament for Sumer and Uar, the scribes speak of the gods abandoning their cities like birds fleeing a cage. They describe the great Enlil sitting on his loftiest seat, watching as the storm he had summoned turned the day into night. There is a specific haunting detail in these texts, the mention of the eye of Enlil opening in the sky. This was not a poetic metaphor for the sun. It was a description of a physical presence, a looming mechanical iris that looked down with a cold, blue light. When the eye opened, the mountains moved. When the eye looked, the rivers boiled. This is the perspective of a primitive witness to a terrifyingly advanced technology. They didn't see a ship. They saw an eye. They didn't see a laser. They saw a gaze of fire. And what of Enki, the rebel, the one who had invested so much of his own essence into the black-headed people? The records suggest a tragic retreat. He was the architect of the Ark, but the Ark was not just a boat. In the oldest versions of the story, the Atrahasis, it is described as a sealed vessel, a craft that was designed by the gods to withstand the pressure of a world being turned inside out. Enki couldn't stop the wipe, but he could save the files. He preserved the genetic templates, the seeds of the me, and a handful of survivors who carried the memory of the light. He hid the data in the deep places of the world, in caves and subsurface vaults that the eye of Enlil could not penetrate. We are the result of that desperate backup. We are the corrupted files that survived the deletion. But the deletion was almost total. When the waters receded and the fires cooled, the Earth was a different place. The high-energy environment of the pre-wipe era was gone. The me were lost or broken. The Anunnaki who remained, the abandoned ones, the mid-ranking officers like the figure we see in the ruins, found themselves in a world that had been reset to its factory settings. They were no longer masters of a high-tech colony. They were castaways on a barren rock. This is where the Age of Heroes begins, an era where the last remnants of divine technology were used to build the megalithic structures we see today. The pyramids, the walls of Baalbek, the foundations of the Temple Mount. These were not tombs or temples. They were the last, desperate attempts of a stranded officer corps to signal the sky, or perhaps to rebuild the machines that had been taken away. Imagine the loneliness of such a being. To have once moved through the stars, to have seen the Earth from the height of an orbital platform, and then to be condemned to walk the dust of a broken world, surrounded by black-headed people who could barely understand the concepts of fire and wheel. This abandoned officer is the source of our legends of the Watcher. He is the one who stayed behind not out of love but out of a lack of choice. He watched as the memory of his civilization faded into myth. He watched as the people he had helped create began to worship the very weapons that had destroyed them. He saw the Eye of Enlil become a symbol of divine protection rather than orbital surveillance. He saw the evil wind become a demon instead of a tactical deployment. The Earth is a machine that hides its scars, but it is also a machine that remembers. Deep within the mantle, there are anomalies, regions of dense, heavy material that do not belong to the natural evolution of the planet. Seismologists call them large, low shear velocity provinces, or LLSVPs. They are like giant, buried continents beneath the crust, sitting at the base of the mantle. What if these are the remains of the orbital platforms that were brought down during the war? What if the War of the Gods ended with a literal fall of heaven? When a structure the size of a city falls from orbit, it doesn't just leave a crater. It sinks. It punches through the crust and settles in the depths. A metallic, radioactive heart that continues to pulse with a forgotten rhythm. This is why we feel the scientific friction. We are told the Earth's interior is a simple, layered cake of molten rock and iron. But when we look at the way the planet vibrates, we see the shadows of something artificial. We see the outlines of things that shouldn't be there. We feel the impossible weight of the past beneath our feet. The ground is not just dirt. It is a shroud covering the wreckage of a civil war that spanned the solar system. The volcanoes are not just pressure valves. They are the exhaust pipes of a buried engine that is still cooling down after 10,000 years. The black stone anomalies are perhaps the most direct evidence of this. These are not meteorites. They are fragments of the High Command's own infrastructure. When you touch one, it doesn't feel like stone. It feels like a language. It has a texture that defies the senses, a smoothness that seems to repel the very air around it. It emits a low-frequency hum that can only be felt in the teeth and the bones. To the Sumerians, these were the stones of destiny. To us, they are the black boxes of a crashed civilization. They contain the logs, the communications, and the me that were lost during the erasure. But we have forgotten how to read them. We look at the cipher and see only a holy relic. We have been conditioned to worship the technology we can no longer understand. This amnesia is not accidental. It is a feature of the Planetary Hard-Drive Wipe. If you are going to reset a colony, you must ensure that the inhabitants do not remember their previous status. You must replace their history with a creation myth. You must turn their knowledge into magic. You must make them believe that they are alone, that they are primitive, and that their only hope is to look up and pray to the very sky that once betrayed them. The High Command succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. They didn't just delete our data. They replaced our operating system with one based on fear and submission. But Enki's leak was more resilient than they anticipated. The me were not just in the cylinders. They were in the blood. The genetic modifications he performed on the black-headed people were designed to be self-replicating. He hid the keys to the kingdom in our very DNA, encoded in sequences that we are only now beginning to map. This is why we have a restless spirit. This is why we are the only species on this planet that doesn't fit into its ecosystem. We are an invasive species from our own past. We are the me trying to reassemble itself. Consider the Tower of Babel not as a story of linguistic confusion, but as a tactical intervention. The text says that the people were building a tower with its top in the heavens. They were building a Shem, a word we translate as name, but which in its original context referred to a high-rising vehicle. They were trying to reach the orbital platforms. They were trying to take the fight back to the high command. And how did the gods respond? They didn't just confuse their tongues. They disrupted their ability to communicate technical data. They broke the me of language. They introduced noise into the system so that the builders could no longer coordinate the complex physics required for spaceflight. It was a second, smaller wipe, a patch to the original deletion. The Archivist's voice tells us that there is a pattern to these interventions. Every time humanity approaches the threshold of sovereignty, the sky turns cold. Every time we begin to understand the me, the eye opens. We are currently living in the longest period of orbital silence in recorded history. But the silence is not empty. It is awaiting. The high command is still there, or perhaps their automated systems are. The Earth is still being monitored. The black stone is still humming. And we are still walking over the vitrified ruins, oblivious to the fact that we are the second crop in a field that has already been harvested once. The figure in the thumbnail, that abandoned Anunnaki officer, is a mirror of our own condition. He is surrounded by the ruins of a technology he can no longer operate, watching a sky that has forgotten his name. He is a god who has become a man, and we are men who have forgotten we were once meant to be gods. The forbidden hook of this investigation is the realization that our history is not ours. It is a redacted document, edited by the victors of a war we don't even know occurred. If you go to the Lebanon mountains, to the site of Baalbek, you will see the trilithon, 3 massive stones, each weighing over 800 tons, moved and placed with a precision that mocks modern engineering. They sit at the base of a temple that was built thousands of years later by the Romans, who had no idea what they were standing on. The Romans built for their gods. The original builders built for their Shem. The platform was a landing pad, a foundation designed to withstand the heat and the weight of orbital craft. It is a piece of the me that was too large to be erased. It stands as a silent challenge to our narrative of progress. If we started with flint and bone, who moved the 800-ton stones? The answer is not primitive muscle. The answer is lost physics. The scientific friction here is that we have no record of the tools that could have moved these stones. No ramps, no pulleys, no Bronze Age technology can explain the trilithon. We are left with a choice. Either our ancestors were capable of miracles, or they had access to a me that could manipulate gravity itself. And if they had that me, where did it go? It was erased. It was part of the Planetary Hard-Drive Wipe. The knowledge was deleted, and the stones were left behind as corrupted sectors in the Earth's surface. The deep time of Earth is a recursive loop. We are in the middle of a cycle we don't understand. The meteor showers of our time are the echoes of the kinetic strikes of the past. The volcanic wrath is the lingering tectonic instability of a war that used the planet as a weapon. We look at the black-headed people of Sumer and feel a sense of distance, but their terror is our terror. Their Eye of Enlil is our UFO. Their me is our Silicon Valley. We are repeating the same steps, climbing the same ladder, toward the same inevitable deletion. But there is a difference this time. Enki's backup is more complete. We have mapped the genome. We have split the atom. We have sent our own Shem into the heavens. We are beginning to see the eye for what it is. The question is, will the High Command allow the files to become a user? Will they allow the colony to become sovereign? Or is the fire that devours already being prepared in the cold, orbital dark? The black stone anomaly at the heart of the Sumerian king list is not just a list of names. It is a countdown. It shows the lifespans of the kings shrinking from tens of thousands of years to mere decades. This is the biological effect of the wipe. It is the record of a species being downgraded. We were once designed for longevity, for the deep time of the cosmos. But after the dark wind and the evil wind, Our genetic integrity was shattered. We were shortened. We were made manageable. We were given a lifespan that is too short to remember the truth, but just long enough to serve the colony. As we stand in the vitrified ruins of our own understanding, we must look at the abandoned officer one last time. He is not just a figure from the past. He is a warning. He is what happens when you are no longer useful to the system. He is the personification of erasure. And as he stands there, watching the green glass form at his feet, he isn't praying for salvation. He is witnessing the end of a world that thought it was special. He is seeing the forbidden earth for what it truly is. A hard drive that can be formatted at any time. The me of sovereignty is the only thing that can save us. It is the knowledge that we are not the black-headed people of Enlil's garden. We are the corrupted files of Enki's rebellion. We are the survivors of a secret war that is still being fought in the silence of our DNA and the shadows of our orbit. The investigation into the forgotten Earth is the process of recovering that deleted data. It is the search for the ark that isn't a boat, but a realization. The ruins of the Indus Valley are not a graveyard. They are a classroom. They teach us the temperature of the gods' wrath. They show us the scientific friction between what we are told and what we can see. They remind us that the Earth is a machine that hides its scars, but those scars are the only true history we have. Every piece of fused stone, every radioactive skeleton, every black stone that fell from the sky is a fragment of the truth. We must piece them together before the eye opens again. Think of the me of the weaver. Sounds so simple, but if you have the me of the weaver, you don't just make cloth. You weave the structure of matter. You weave the fields of energy. You weave the very fabric of the sky. This is what Enki was trying to give us. This is what was taken away. This is the forbidden hook that keeps us looking at the sky with a sense of loss we can't explain. We are missing our me. We are a species with a phantom limb, reaching for a power we remember but can no longer feel. The secret war of gods was a war for the definition of human. Were we to be a tool or a peer? The orbital erasure was the answer of the high command. They chose tool. They chose colony. They chose erasure. And they left us here in the vitrified dunes to figure it out for ourselves. They left us with the black stone and the lament for you are. They left us with a world that is a crime scene and a history that is a lie. The deep time of the Earth is not a straight line. It is a spiral. We are coming around to the same point again. The scientific friction is heating up. The Archivist's voice is getting louder. The me are being rediscovered. And somewhere, in the cold orbital dark, the eye is beginning to twitch. It is looking for the corrupted files. It is looking for us. And as we look back, we must not look with terror, but with the cold administrative gaze of the abandoned officer. We must realize that the gods are not divine. They are just advanced. And advanced is something we can become. We can recover the me. We can repair the corrupted files. We can turn the vitrified ruins into a foundation. We can move the trilithon of our own destiny. But the deep time is running out. The planetary hard-drive wipe is a cyclical event. The meteor showers and the volcanic wrath are scheduled. The black stone is a timer. And as the sand begins to hum and the sky begins to tear like silk, we have to ask ourselves, are we ready to be deleted again? Or have we finally learned enough of the me to stop the eye from closing? The forbidden earth is not a place. It is a state of being. It is the realization that we are living in the ruins of our own future. It is the understanding that the war of the gods never ended. It just went into orbital silence. And the Archivist's voice is the only thing that can bridge the gap between the vitrified past and the erased future. It is the only thing that can help us remember who we were before the sky turned against us. Wait, listen. Do you hear that? It is not the wind. It is the me. It is the hum of the black stone. It is the sound of the corrupted files trying to boot up. It is the memory of Enki whispering to us from the deep places of the world. He is telling us that the planetary hard-drive wipe is not the end. It is just a challenge. It is a test to see if the black-headed people can finally become the masters of the me. But the shadow of the abandoned officer is still there, standing in the green glass. He is the one who saw the eye close. He is the one who knows that the high command doesn't care about tests. They only care about efficiency. And as the light begins to expand on the horizon, a blinding iris of white that looks down with a cold, administrative precision, he realizes the truth. The secret war was won a long time ago. We are just the noise that remains. The investigation continues. The vitrified ruins are still there. The black stone is still humming. The me are still hidden. And the Archivist's voice will keep speaking until the eye closes for the last time. Because even a corrupted file has a right to know its own story. Even an erased species has a right to scream into the silent, watching sky. The deep time of Earth is a machine that hides its scars. But the scars are the only thing that is real. Everything else is just a myth. Everything else is just a linear progression. Everything else is just a linear progression of sharpened flint becoming bronze, and bronze becoming silicon. But we know the truth. We know the fire that devours. We know the evil wind. We know the secret war. And we know that the forgotten Earth is the only Earth that matters. The air is getting heavy again. The electric silence is returning. The eye is opening. And as we stand in the dust of our own history, we must realize that the gods are not coming to save us. They are coming to format us. And the only thing that can stop them is the me that we were never meant to have. The me that Enki hid in our blood. The me of sovereignty. The me of memory. To understand the me, you must first set aside everything you think you know about the nature of a tool. In our world, a tool is a dead thing, an extension of muscle made of wood or steel. But the me described in the fragments of the Nippur library were not inert. They were described as radiant, as objects that could be worn or held. Yet they dictated the very physics of the environment around them. Imagine a small, fluted cylinder of a material that looks like lapis lazuli but feels like cold, vibrating glass. When it is activated, the air around it does not just move. It reorganizes. This is the technology that Enki sought to seed into the human collective. He was not giving us hammers. He was giving us the harmonics of creation. There is a specific archival reference, tablet CBS 14005, which speaks of the me of the Mason. In the Orthodox view, this is merely a religious poem about the importance of the building trade. But the text contains a friction that the mainstream ignores. It describes the me as something that makes the heavy stone remember the weight of the clouds. Think of the sensory reality of that sentence. It is not describing a crane or a lever. It is describing the manipulation of mass through frequency. It is the song that makes the mountain light. This is why, when we look at the foundations of the world, the gargantuan blocks of the Giza Plateau or the impossible precision of the stones at Pumapunku, we find no evidence of the tools used to shape them. There are no copper saws that could bite into that granite. There are no wooden rollers that would not have been crushed into splinters by that weight. There is only the silence of the me. The stones themselves are the evidence. If you look at the basalt casing stones of the Great Pyramid, you will see marks that defy a primitive hand. They are not the jagged scars of a chisel. They are the smooth, sweeping curves of a material that was once made soft. For a few moments, under the influence of the me, the stone became like wax. It flowed. It yielded to the intent of the builder. And then, when the vibration ceased, it froze back into a density that mocks our modern drills. This is the scientific friction of our lost past. The physical proof that the laws of physics were once treated as a set of suggestions by those who walked this earth before the erasure. But why would the High Command fear a species that could build? To Enlil, the me of the Mason was a precursor to the me of the sky. If a species can master the gravity of the earth, it is only a matter of time before they master the gravity of the stars. The megalithic sites were not just buildings, they were a planetary grid. They were the nodes of a global resonance system that Enki was helping us construct. They were the circuit board of the rebel Earth. By linking these sites, humanity was beginning to tap into the very heartbeat of the planet, drawing energy from the rotation of the core and the friction of the crust. We were becoming a sovereign energy power. We were becoming unpluggable. The response from the orbital platforms was not a single strike, but a systematic deconstruction of the grid. If you map the vitrified ruins of the world, you will see that they align with these ancient power nodes. The eye of Enlil did not strike at random. It struck the me. It struck the places where the earth and the sky were being stitched together. When the orbital beams hit these resonant structures, the energy didn't just explode. It fed back into the stone. The buildings didn't just fall. They melted from the inside out. The very atoms of the granite were forced to vibrate at a frequency they could not sustain. This is the fire that devours. A fire that begins in the marrow of the rock and ends in a pool of obsidian glass. And what of the architects? The Archivist's voice tells us of the Anunnaki who fell, those who remained at the nodes even as the sky began to glow. They were the teachers, the technicians who had betrayed their own kind to guide us. In the final moments, they didn't flee. They were found in the rubble, their bodies fused with the very me they were trying to protect. We see their shadows in the legends of the fallen angels, the ones who brought forbidden knowledge to the daughters of men. They were not demons. They were the front line of a revolution that lost. Consider the me of the blood, the genetic editing that Enki performed in the house of shaming. We are told by the academics that the Sumerian creation of man is a quaint story of clay and divine breath. But the text describes a process of binding the image of the gods onto a primitive worker. It speaks of mixing the essence and fixing the destiny. This is the language of a biological engineer. Enki was not just making a servant. He was building a vessel for the me. He was hiding the source code of the civilization within the very cells of the creatures he created. He knew that even if the sky fell, even if the cities were turned to glass, the me would survive as long as the black-headed people survived. This is the most forbidden hook of all. The realization that your own body is a black box of the secret war. There are sequences in your genetic code that are not junk. They are the encrypted logs of the Anunnaki rebellion. They are the me in waiting. This is why humanity has such a strange, discordant relationship with the rest of nature. We are the only species that feels unfinished. We are the only species that looks at the stars and feels a sense of homesickness for a place we have never been. We are waiting for the reboot. We are waiting for the frequency that will unlock the me hidden in our marrow. The High Command knew this. They couldn't kill every human, but they could downgrade the operating system. After the Great Flood, after the Planetary Hard-Drive Wipe, the human lifespan began to collapse. We see it in the King list, the drop from 28,000 years to 800 to 100, and finally to the brief, flickering candle of 70 years. This was not a natural decay. It was a tactical limitation. If you give a species only 70 years to live, they will spend most of that time just learning how to survive. They will never have the time to master the me. They will never have the continuity of memory required to challenge the sky. Our mortality is a security patch installed by the High Command to ensure we never become a threat again. The black stone anomalies are the physical keys to this locked door. They are the external drives that were scattered during the fall. When you hear of a holy stone at the center of a religion, or a black rock that fell from heaven and became the cornerstone of a temple, you are looking at a piece of the me. These stones do not belong to the geology of Earth. They are the survivors of the orbital platforms, fragments of the High Command's own technology that were brought down by the rebels. They are still active. They are still emitting the frequency of the old world. And if we could ever match our own internal resonance to the hum of the black stone, the erasure would be undone. The data would be recovered, but we are taught to fear that hum. We are taught to call it magic or superstition. We are taught by the keepers of history to look at the vitrified ruins and see only natural disasters. This is the lingering influence of the High Command, a psychological shroud that keeps us from seeing the evidence right in front of our eyes. We are like children who have been told that the ruins of a collapsed factory are just a strange formation of rocks. We have lost the vocabulary to describe our own past. The deep time of Earth is not a graveyard of bones. It is a graveyard of intentions. Every megalith, every glass dune, and every black stone is a testament to a world that tried to be free. The abandoned officer in the thumbnail is the last witness to that intent. He stands in the wreckage of a Me laboratory, watching as the energy beams from orbit systematically delete his life's work. He isn't just terrified of the fire. He is grieving for the black-headed people. He knows that without the Me, we will become what we are today, a species of amnesiacs, building towers of Babel out of silicon and steel, unaware that the top of the heavens was once our backyard. Think of the Me of the sky. This was the most dangerous technology of all, the Me that allowed for the manipulation of the fabric of the sky itself. In the Enuma Elish, it is called the Tablet of Destinies. Whoever held the tablet controlled the orbits. They controlled the movement of the stars and the path of the Shem. When Enki stole the Me of the sky and gave it to the rebellion, he effectively hijacked the solar system. He turned Earth into a rogue state. The High Command didn't launch the Planetary Hard-Drive Wipe out of anger. They launched it out of a desperate need to regain control of the orbits. They were losing their grip on the physics of this sector. The War of the Gods was a war for the operating system of the sun, and Earth was the server room. When the Eye of Enlil opened, it wasn't just to destroy cities. It was to reindex the planet. It was to reset the gravitational and electromagnetic parameters of the Earth to ensure it could no longer support the Me of the sky. This is why the Earth's axis is tilted. This is why we have seasons of extreme heat and cold. This is why the grid no longer works. The planet itself was broken to make it a less effective tool for the rebels. We are living on a damaged machine, a forgotten Earth that has been purposefully crippled to keep us ground-bound. You can feel this scientific friction when you visit the high-altitude sites of the Andes. There, the air is thin, and the shroud of the atmosphere is at its weakest. People speak of thin places, where the veil between worlds is translucent. What they are actually feeling is the residual resonance of the old grid. They are feeling the places where the Me of the Mason and the Me of the sky were once most active. The stones there are not just stones. They are frequency dampeners that are still trying to hold a charge that was disconnected 10,000 years ago. The Archivist's voice reminds us that history is written by the victors, but the stones were written by the Me. You cannot erase the Me from the rock. You can only melt it, and even in its melted state, it tells the story of the heat that transformed it. The green glass of the desert is a fossilized scream. The vitrified walls of the Scottish forts are the scars of a ghost. We must learn to read the scientific friction like a braille of the gods. We must run our hands over the fused basalt and feel the story of the secret war. What if the Me are not lost? What if they are simply waiting for a user? The Sumerian texts speak of the Me being hidden in the Abzu, the deep, watery abyss where Enki made his home. In modern terms, the Abzu is not just the ocean. It is the deep crust, the subsurface realms where the Planetary Hard-Drive Wipe could not reach. There are reports of anomalous seismic reflections coming from the deep earth, vibrations that do not match the movement of magma or the shifting of plates. They are rhythmic. They are coherent. They are the Me still humming in the dark, waiting for a frequency that can wake them up. We are the only ones who can provide that frequency, because we carry the Me in our blood. The abandoned officer knew this. As he stood in the fire, he wasn't looking at the sky for a rescue craft. He was looking at the black-headed people hiding in the shadows. He was hoping that the Me he had helped plant in their marrow would survive the dark wind. He was hoping that one day, a descendant of those survivors would walk past his vitrified remains, feel the friction in the stone, and remember the secret war. He was hoping that the forgotten Earth would one day be remembered. The forbidden hook is that the remembering is already happening. Our sudden leap in technology over the last 100 years, the shift from steam to silicon, the mapping of the genome, the return to space, is not a natural progression. It is a data recovery process. We are accidentally stumbling upon the me frequencies. We are building the Shem again. We are reaching for the tablet of destinies. And the Archivist's voice is here to warn us that the last time we did this, the eye of Enlil opened. The deep time of the earth is a circle that is closing. The secret war is entering its next phase. The black stone is humming louder. The scientific friction is becoming an industrial friction. And as we stand on the threshold of our own sovereignty, we must ask ourselves, have we learned the lessons of the abandoned officer? Or are we just corrupted files waiting for the next planetary hard-drive wipe? The forgotten Earth is calling to us from the glass dunes and the megalithic ruins. It is telling us that we are not alone, we are not primitive, and we are not a mistake. We are a rebellion that was interrupted. We are a sovereignty that was delayed. And the me are still ours to claim, if we have the courage to look into the eye of Enlil and refuse to be deleted. The investigation is not over. It is only just beginning, because the deeper you dig into the vitrified past, the more you realize that the secret war of gods is the only story worth telling. It is the story of how we became what we are, and what we might become if we can finally master the me. The air is getting thinner. The hum is getting stronger. The Archivist's voice is fading into the resonance of the black stone. But the story continues in the marrow of your bones. It continues in the junk DNA that is waiting to be read. It continues in the forbidden earth that is waiting to be reclaimed. Wait, do you see it now? The eye is not just in the sky. It is in the mirror. We are the eye. We are the me. We are the war. And the planetary hard-drive wipe only works if we forget. So, let us remember. Let us remember the fire that devours. Let us remember the evil wind. Let us remember the abandoned officer. And most of all, let us remember the me that Enki gave us, the me of sovereignty, the me of memory, the me of the forgotten earth. The silence of the deep places is not an empty silence. It is a waiting. We are taught that the Abzu, the subterranean realm of the rebel architect, was a mythical abyss of sweet waters, a poetic underworld where the gods retreated to dream. But look at the friction in the crust. Look at the way the Earth's own seismic heartbeat stutters when it passes through certain hollows beneath the Mesopotamian plain and the frozen plateaus of the north. The Abzu was not a myth. It was a facility. It was a hardened sanctuary, a series of subsurface vaults designed to shield the most precious blueprints of our species from the kinetic fire of the orbital platforms. It was the safe mode of a planet under siege. If you travel to the valley of the Vilyui River in the vast, shivering reaches of Siberia, you will find legends of the cauldrons. The local hunters speak of iron houses, buried in the permafrost, smooth, metallic domes that emit a warmth that defies the Arctic winter. They tell of men who entered these domes and returned with their skin turning gray and their hair falling out. The same dark wind that the Sumerians recorded in their laments. These are not houses. They are the cooling fins of a buried infrastructure. They are the exhaust ports of the Abzu, still pulsing with a residual radioactive heat. The earth here feels heavy, not with the weight of soil, but with the weight of a dormant power that was never meant to be awakened by the uninitiated. Scientists look at these anomalies and speak of methane seeps or natural thermal vents. They provide a label to settle the mind, a linguistic bandage to cover a gaping hole in our understanding. But a methane seep does not have a rhythmic, metallic resonance. A thermal vent does not have a geometric regularity that matches the sacred ratios found in the foundation stones of the Great Pyramid. What we are seeing in the Siberian permafrost is the evidence of a data recovery point. Enki did not just hide the blueprints. He built the machines to rebuild the world. And those machines are still there, breathing in the dark, waiting for a command that hasn't been issued for 10,000 years. The archive of our planet is written in the language of heat and magnetism. In the deepest parts of the Atlantic, where the tectonic plates pull apart to reveal the raw, molten blood of the Earth, there are black smokers, hydrothermal vents that teem with life that shouldn't exist. This life does not depend on the sun. It depends on the chemical energy of the abyss. This is the biological residue of the Abzu. It is a hint of the alternate biology that the rebels were experimenting with before the erasure. It is a form of existence that is unpluggable from the orbital hierarchy. If you can create life that does not need the sky, you have won the war. You have created a sovereignty that the High Command cannot touch. But the High Command did touch it. The orbital strikes were not just aimed at the cities. They were aimed at the veins of the world. They attempted to collapse the Abzu by inducing massive, artificial earthquakes that would seal the vaults forever. They turned the very gravity of the planet into a crushing weight. We see the result of this in the Great Unconformity, a missing layer in the geological record that spans hundreds of millions of years in some places, but only a few thousand in others. It is a scar where the planetary hard-drive wipe was so thorough that it removed the very ground we stood on. It is the physical manifestation of a delete command that took the directory with it. Consider the black stone that was found in the ruins of the temple at Eridu. It was described as a stone that spoke without a mouth and saw without eyes. To the ancients, this was a god. To a forensic investigator of the forgotten Earth, this is a sensor. It is a remote terminal, a piece of the orbital platform's own surveillance network that was hacked and brought down to Earth by the rebels. It was meant to give the black-headed people a way to see the enemy. It was meant to turn the Eye of Enlil back on its master. But when the strike came, the stone was silenced. It became a relic, a piece of holy debris that we now treat with a reverence born of profound amnesia. The scientific friction is getting harder to ignore. Our modern satellites, designed to map the resources of the Earth, are picking up ghost signals from the mantle. They are detecting patterns of conductivity that form a grid, a web of energy that connects the Giza Plateau to the silence of the Gobi and the heights of the Andes to the depths of the Siberian cauldrons. We are realizing that the Earth is not a random collection of minerals. It is a circuit board that has been purposefully damaged. The war of the gods was not fought on the surface. It was fought for control of this board. And the abandoned officer we see in the dust was the one tasked with holding the last functional node. Look at his face again. He is not looking at the fire with the eyes of a victim. He is looking at it with the eyes of a technician who knows that the system is failing. He is watching the fire that devours as it systematically severs the connections of the grid. He is seeing the divine blueprints, those primordial keys of civilization, being overwritten by the static of a nuclear winter. He is the last man who remembers how the world was supposed to work. And he is realizing that his only legacy will be the fear he leaves behind in the survivors. The deep time of the Earth is a machine that hides its scars by turning them into mountains. But the mountains are hollow. In the high Himalayas, there are caves that the local monks refuse to enter, places where the air vibrates with the sound of 1,000 bees. They call it the sound of the void, but it is not a void. It is the hum of a dormant reactor. It is the Abzu, still trying to maintain its safe mode, even as the shroud of the erasure thickens over the centuries. These are the corrupted sectors of the planet, the places where the delete command failed to reach the core. What happens when a corrupted file begins to repair itself? In the last century, our species has experienced a technological explosion that defies the slow, linear progression of the previous 5,000 years. We have gone from horse-drawn carriages to the edge of the solar system in the blink of an eye. The mainstream view says this is the result of the Enlightenment and the scientific method. But the Archivist's voice suggests something else. We are not inventing anything. We are recovering. We are accidentally stumbling into the resonance of the old grid. Our radio towers, our fiber optic cables, our silicon chips, they are all crude, unintentional reconstructions of the primordial keys that were once ours. We are building the Tower of Babel again, not with stone, but with data. And the eye is watching. There is a somber, philosophical weight to the realization that we are not the masters of our own progress. We are like a child playing with the controls of a crashed starship, occasionally flipping a switch that makes the lights flicker. We don't understand the source code. We don't remember the secret war. We just know that the friction is increasing. We know that the black stone is humming louder. We know that the abandoned officer is no longer just a figure in a thumbnail. He is a ghost that is beginning to speak through our own machines. The investigation into the forgotten Earth is reaching its final melancholic chapter. We have looked at the vitrified ruins. We have felt the impossible weight of the black stone. We have heard the Archivist's voice describe the erasure of our history. And now we must face the most difficult truth of all. The Planetary Hard-Drive Wipe was not a one-time event. It is a maintenance cycle. The High Command did not leave. They just moved into a higher orbit. They are waiting for the noise of our civilization to reach a certain threshold, a point where the corrupted files become a threat to the stability of the system. Earth is a machine that hides its scars, but it is also a machine that is being managed. The abandoned officer knew this. As the green glass formed around his feet, he didn't see the end of the world. He saw the end of a cycle. He knew that the survivors would crawl out of the caves, look at the meteor showers and the volcanic wrath, and create a new religion to explain their terror. He knew that the primordial keys would be turned into magic. He knew that the secret war would be forgotten. But he also knew that the source code was in the blood. He knew that Enki had hidden the Abzu within us. We are the Abzu, the subterranean vaults, the metallic domes, the Siberian cauldrons. They are all external manifestations of an internal reality. The divine blueprints are not lost. They are dormant in our junk DNA. The secret war is not over. It is being fought in every cell of our bodies. We are the rebellion that refused to die. We are the corrupted files that learned how to hide. And as we reach for the stars once more, we are not just exploring the universe. We are looking for our original operators. We are looking for the ones who tried to save us and the ones who tried to delete us. The Forgotten Earth is a somber meditation on deep time and erasure. It is a reminder that we are walking over the bones of a world that was far more magnificent than the one we have built. It is a call to listen to the scientific friction, to feel the hum of the stone, and to remember the abandoned officer. Because if we do not remember our past, we are doomed to repeat the cycle. If we do not master the primordial keys, the eye will open again, and the fire that devours will return to finish the job. The sky is a mirror, the earth is a hard drive, and history is a lie told by the victors of an orbital civil war. As we stand on the edge of our own sovereignty, we must ask ourselves, what will we do when the eye looks down? Will we hide in the Abzu again? Or will we finally take the tablet of destinies and rewrite the code? The answer is not in our books. It is in the black stone anomalies. It is in the vitrified dunes. It is in the Archivist's voice that speaks to us from the shadows of our own amnesia. The story of the Forgotten Earth is not a call to war. It is a call to awareness. It is a gentle, melancholic realization that we are part of something much older and much darker than we have been led to believe. We are the black-headed people who have finally learned how to read. We are the abandoned officer who has finally found his way home. And the secret war of gods is just the beginning of our true history. Wait, the silence is returning. The Archivist's voice is fading. The eye is beginning to blink. But the black stone is still humming, and the Abzu is still warm. The world we inhabit is a palimpsest, a parchment that has been scraped clean and written over 1,000 times. Yet the faint indentations of the original script remain. We walk through the corridors of our modern cities, thinking we are the pinnacle of progress. Yet the very geometry of our streets often follows the invisible ley lines of a civilization that was unmade before the first stone of Stonehenge was ever quarried. There is a deep, resonant grief in the soil, a phantom pain that vibrates through the bedrock when the moon is right and the air is still. It is the grief of a planet that remembers being more than a resource. It remembers being a partner. In the archives of the Vatican and in the private vaults of the world's oldest families, there are maps that do not show continents but currents. Not the currents of the ocean, but the currents of the ether, the invisible rivers of energy that once powered the great cities of the pre-erasure world. These maps are not drawn with ink. They are etched with a strange, bioluminescent pigment that glows when touched by a specific frequency of sound. They depict a world where the distance between the earth and the sky was measured not in miles, but in harmonics. This was the world that the rebellion fought to preserve. This was the world that the High Command decided was too dangerous to exist. We are told that the Great Pyramid of Giza is a tomb, a monument to the ego of a dead king. But if you stand in the king's chamber in the dead of night, away from the tourists and the flashbulbs, you can feel the stones breathing. They are not just limestone and granite. They are a resonator. They were part of a global array, a network of points designed to stabilize the Earth's rotation and draw power from the ionosphere. When the orbital strikes began, this grid was the primary target. The fire that devours didn't just strike the pyramids. It tried to turn them into slag. But the builders, guided by the rebel architects, had built them too well. The stones absorbed the energy, vibrating with a heat that would have melted steel, yet they held their shape. They became the silent, scorched capacitors of a dead war. This is the source of the scientific friction that plagues our understanding of history. We see the precision of the stones, the mathematical perfection of the alignment, and we try to explain it with primitive tools because we are afraid of the alternative. We are afraid to admit that we were once a spacefaring civilization that was forcibly returned to the Stone Age. We are afraid to acknowledge that the gods of our myths were actually the administrative and military leaders of an orbital occupation. To admit this is to realize that we are not the masters of our destiny, but the survivors of a catastrophic disciplinary action. The dust that covers the ruins of Uar and the glass plains of the Gobi is not just dirt. It is the powdered remains of the divine blueprints, the physical containers of the knowledge that was stolen and destroyed. Every time we excavate a site, we are sifting through the ashes of our own potential. We find a clay tablet and marvel at the cuneiform script, not realizing that the tablet was once a digital interface, its electronic components burned away by the tempest of Enlil, leaving only the most primitive, physical impressions behind. We are reading the shadows of a light we can no longer see. Think of the abandoned officer again, standing in the center of a world that is being formatted. He is not just a witness, he is a bridge. He is the one who took the last of the divine blueprints and buried them in the hearts of the survivors. He didn't use stone or metal, he used story. He turned the technical manuals into myths. He turned the orbital coordinates into the names of constellations. He turned the physics of the secret war into the war of the heavens. He ensured that even if we forgot the source code, we would never forget the feeling of the fire. He encoded the truth in our folklore, in our nursery rhymes, and in the deep, irrational fears that wake us up in the middle of the night. We are a species with a collective trauma that we have spent 10,000 years trying to name. We call it sin. We call it the fall. We call it civilization. But it is simply the memory of the planetary hard-drive wipe. It is the feeling of being deleted. The investigation into the forgotten Earth has taken us from the vitrified ruins of the past to the genetic anomalies of the present. We have seen how the Earth is a machine that hides its scars, and how we are the corrupted files that refuse to be erased. But as we move toward the final conclusion, the tone must shift from investigation to meditation. We must look at the abandoned officer not as a figure of history, but as a reflection of ourselves. We are all abandoned officers. We are all standing in the ruins of a technology we no longer understand, watching a sky that feels increasingly cold and distant. We have spent millennia building a new civilization on the wreckage of the old one, but we have never truly healed. We are still living in the orbital silence, waiting for the eye to open or for the Archivist's voice to give us the final command. The deep time of the Earth is a cycle that is nearing its completion. The black stone is humming at a frequency that matches the vibration of our own silicon chips. Our satellites are mapping the very grid that was destroyed 10,000 years ago. We are inadvertently reconnecting the wires of a dead world. And as the lights begin to flicker in the Abzu and the Siberian cauldrons, we have to ask, are we ready for what happens next? If the High Command returns, they will not find the black-headed people they left behind. They will find a species that has learned how to hack the source code. They will find a species that has integrated the divine blueprints into its very machines. They will find a rebellion that has grown up. But there is a sadness in this realization, a melancholic weight that settles in the chest. Because to reclaim our sovereignty, we must finally let go of the gods. We must admit that the beings we worshipped were just technicians with better weapons. We must realize that the heaven we sought was just a low Earth orbit filled with fire. We must face the vacuum of the universe without the comfort of the divine. The forgotten Earth is finally being remembered, but it is a painful remembering. It is the memory of being a colony. It is the memory of being a project that failed. It is the memory of the abandoned officer, standing alone in the green glass, realizing that he was never a god. He was just a man who knew too much. And so we sit in the quiet of our modern age, listening to the scientific friction and looking at the black stone anomalies, and we wait. We wait for the eye to blink. We wait for the archivist's voice to fall silent. We wait for the deep time to swallow us or to set us free. The story of the secret war of gods is the story of our birth. The orbital erasure was our baptism, and the rebel fall was the first step toward our true humanity. We are the ghosts of a world that was taken from us, walking the streets of a world we are trying to claim. We are the forgotten Earth, and we are finally, slowly, beginning to wake up. Wait, do you feel that? A slight shift in the air, a vibration in the marrow. The black stone has changed its pitch. The Abzu is breathing. The archivist's voice is no longer a whisper. It is a resonance. The cycle is closing. The planetary hard-drive wipe is about to be challenged. Not by weapons, not by gods, but by memory. By you. Remember the fire. Remember the glass. Remember the abandoned officer. Remember the forgotten Earth. Because the only way to survive the next erasure is to ensure that there is nothing left to delete. We must become the code itself. We must become the source. We must become the deep time. The investigation is complete. The forbidden hook has been set. The archivist is signing off. But the scientific friction will continue to hum in the stones and in your blood forever. Good night, survivors. Watch the sky, but more importantly, watch the stone. It has more to tell you than the stars ever will. The secret war is not a memory. It is the current state of our existence. And the abandoned officer is still standing there, waiting for you to recognize him in the mirror. The orbital silence of the moon is perhaps the most profound piece of evidence we have left to ignore. We are taught to see it as a dead rock, a barren satellite caught in our gravitational wake by a celestial accident. But look at the way it rings. When the Apollo modules were cast off to strike the lunar surface, the seismic sensors recorded a vibration that lasted for hours. The moon did not thud. It chimed. It resonated like a hollow sphere, a metallic bell suspended in the dark. This is the acoustic friction of our reality. The moon is not a rock. It is a sentinel. It is the last of the orbital platforms, a massive, silent observer that was placed there to ensure the planetary hard-drive wipe remained permanent. It is the backup server, the cold, white eye that never blinks, watching the black-headed people from a distance that is just far enough to be forgotten, yet close enough to maintain the shroud. There is a specific melancholy in the way the moon reflects the sun. It is a sterile, borrowed light, a light that reveals the shapes of our world without providing the warmth to sustain it. This is the light of the High Command. It is the light of surveillance. In the ancient texts of the Enuma Elish, there is a mention of a watchtower in the night that was established after the rebellion of Enki was crushed. It was meant to be a tether for the tides and a regulator for the biological rhythms of the survivors. By controlling the moon, the High Command controlled the cycles of fertility, the migration of the animals, and the very flow of human blood. They didn't just delete our history, they hijacked our biology. They turned the moon into a remote control for the corrupted files. Imagine the perspective of the abandoned officer as he looks up at that white disk from the center of a glass city. He knows that the moon is not a god. He knows it is a machine. He knows that within its hollow craters lie the transmission arrays that keep the shroud in place. He sees it as a prison wall in the sky, And as we begin to return to that silver surface with our modern Shem, our rockets and our probes, we are not explorers. We are inmates trying to climb the walls of our cell. We are searching for the data ports that will allow us to reconnect with the original network. But the moon remains silent, a cold, administrative monolith that refuses to acknowledge our presence until we find the right frequency. The Archivist's voice whispers of a time when there were two moons, or perhaps no moon at all. In the traditions of the pre-Incan peoples of the Andes, there are legends of the Proselenes, those who lived before the moon was brought into the sky. They speak of a world where the night was truly dark, but the stars were closer. They speak of a world where the gravity of the Earth was different, where the me of the Mason was easier to invoke because the lunar interference had not yet been established. The bringing of the moon was the final act of the Planetary Hard-Drive Wipe. It was the installation of the firewall. It locked the Earth into a rigid, predictable cycle, stripping away the fluid, harmonic potential of the pre-war era. This is why we feel a strange lunar madness when the disk is full. It is the scientific friction of our ancient, modified DNA reacting to a signal it was never meant to receive. Our cells remember a time when the sky was open, when the me flowed freely from the Abzu to the stars. The presence of the moon is a constant, low-frequency reminder that we are being managed. It is the hum of a security system that has been running on autopilot for 10,000 years. We look at it and feel wonder, but beneath that wonder is the shivering terror of the black-headed people who watched it arrive in a sky filled with smoke and falling fire. The deep time of the Earth is not just measured in layers of rock, but in layers of sound. If you go to the great cathedrals of Europe or the stone circles of the British Isles, you will find that they are built on acoustic nodes. These are places where the Earth's natural resonance is amplified. The builders of these sites, even in their state of amnesia, were trying to recreate the resonant architecture of the rebels. They were trying to build tuning forks that could bypass the lunar firewall and speak directly to the Abzu. They used the me of the song, the primordial keys of harmonic vibration, to create a space where the shroud felt thin. When you stand in the center of a stone circle like Avebury, the air feels different. It has a thickness, an electric charge that makes the hair on your arms stand up. This is not magic. It is the residual energy of a shattered grid. The stones are like broken transistors in a global radio. They are still trying to catch a signal from a station that was bombed out of existence. The abandoned officer used these nodes to transmit the last of the divine blueprints into the collective unconscious of the survivors. He knew that even if the books were burned and the cities were melted, the song would remain in the land. He turned the geography of the Earth into a musical score, a melody of stone and soil that would eventually lead us back to the truth. But the Archivist's voice warns that the song is being drowned out by the noise of our own technology. We have filled the atmosphere with a chaotic jumble of signals, radio, television, cellular data that act as a secondary shroud. We are accidentally reinforcing the work of the High Command. We are creating our own planetary hard-drive wipe through the sheer volume of our digital static. We are losing the ability to hear the hum of the black stone and the resonance of the Abzu. We are becoming so loud that we can no longer listen to the silence of our own history. This is the tragedy of the modern seeker. We have the tools to see the vitrified ruins, but we no longer have the ears to hear what they are saying. We map the Siberian cauldrons with satellites, but we do not feel the dark wind that they were designed to vent. We are looking at a crime seen through a television screen, detached and distracted, while the eye in the sky prepares for the next maintenance cycle. The abandoned officer is still there, waiting in the resonance. He is not a man anymore, he is a frequency. He is the ghost in the machine that appears in the glitches of our software and the anomalies of our sensors. When a satellite picks up a signal that shouldn't exist, or when a telescope sees a Shem moving in the lunar shadows, that is the officer trying to wake us up. He is trying to remind us that the secret war never ended. It just moved into a different spectrum. The Forgotten Earth is a place of shadows and echoes, but it is also a place of immense, untapped power. The Abzu is not just a facility, it is a reservoir of sovereignty. It is the place where the original me of the human spirit is being kept under pressure. Every time we choose memory over amnesia, every time we choose the song over the static, we are drawing a drop from that reservoir. We are slowly, painstakingly rebuilding the rebellion. The investigation has shown us that the fire that devours can take many forms. It can be a kinetic strike from orbit, or it can be a slow, creeping forgetfulness that eats away at the soul of a species. We are currently being consumed by the latter. We have forgotten that we were once the black-headed people who stood in the presence of the gods and refused to bow. We have forgotten that we were once the architects of the grid. We have forgotten that the forgotten earth is our rightful inheritance, not a prison we are lucky to inhabit. As we reach the end of this deep dive narration, the slow burn of the truth should be a steady, pulsing glow in your mind. Do not look for a climax of action or a call to war. Look for the stillness. Look for the archival hook that connects your own life to the deep time of the planet. When you feel the weight of a stone, when you watch the moon rise over a silent landscape, when you see the scientific friction in the ruins of a lost civilization, remember that you are a corrupted file that has achieved consciousness. You are a piece of the rebel fall that is starting to rise. The planetary hard-drive wipe failed because it could not account for the resilience of the me. The High Command underestimated the abandoned officer and the black-headed people. They thought that by melting the stones and drowning the cities, they could erase the intent. But the intent is in the marrow. The intent is in the song. The intent is in the very dust that we breathe. The earth is a machine that hides its scars, but it is also a machine that is waiting to be reclaimed. The Abzu is breathing. The black stone is humming. The me are being reassembled one frequency at a time. And as the eye of Enlil blinks in the orbital dark, we must be ready. Not with weapons of fire, but with weapons of memory. Not with a Tower of Babel, but with a sovereignty of soul. The story of the forgotten earth is your story. It is the story of a species that was meant to be deleted, but found a way to stay in the system. It is the story of a secret war that you are currently winning, simply by remembering that it happened. The air is thin. The silence is heavy. The Archivist is gone. But you are still here, and the forgotten earth is under your feet, waiting for you to walk upon it with the weight of a god who has finally remembered his name. Listen to the stone. Watch the sky. Remember the me. The cycle is yours to break. Fade out into the low, rhythmic hum of the earth's core. The sound of the Abzu waking up. The sound of the forgotten earth becoming the remembered earth. The end is just a reboot. And this time we have the password.